Welcome to another episode of Touring the AFC South. I am your host, Mike Patton, and on this episode, we're going to be talking to someone that is dialed in, someone that has been gracing the airwaves for a good long time, and someone that has been one of my idols in terms of, how he handles everything with class and grace and dignity on air. That would be Mr. Steve Wyche. What's going on, man?
What do you say, Mike? Good being back on. Appreciate you having me on. Sorry it's been a minute, but now we're here.
Yes, sir. We definitely are. And speaking of being here, free agency, trades, draft, all here as well.
Yeah.
And some surprising ones as well. We're going to get into, kind of some of the trades, some of the, the draft talk, and also some of the free agency, when it comes to the AFC South on this episode in just a minute. But of course, I always got to get something off my chest with each and every episode. And with this one, it's always comes every free agency, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, whether it's your boy at work, whoever it is, you always got somebody that's pocket watching. Now, I totally understand you like, hey, maybe he gets this, maybe he shouldn't get this, maybe he shouldn't get that. But I totally understand that a lot of these guys put in a ton of effort to get the things that they should get. And, whether it's right or wrong, being an analyst, totally understand that. People being analysts, that's what people do. But, sometimes I kind of, it kind of does seem to be a little much when you look on, the Twitter sphere. I'm not going to call it X, Steve. But but you look on that, and you look on other social media, like, man, he shouldn't have got that. He shouldn't get this, that. I'm like, okay, well, unfortunately, it would be proven on the field. So, that's just my thoughts on it.
Look, the only pockets people need to watch are the ones with the owners, because if they didn't have the money, they wouldn't pay it. Right? You have to understand, if they're paying Jamar Chase $40 million a year, and they're paying Joe Burrow $50 million a year, well, how much money is the owners making? Like that's the question. I keep saying, like, guys, if the business isn't booming, then it wouldn't be paying salaries like this. The salary cap would not have gone up $20 million this year if business was not functioning well in the NFL. So you could sit there and say, like you said, this player didn't earn this player did. Yeah, he did, because your owners are paying it. If you get a job anywhere and somebody's willing to pay you X, it's because they believe you're going to come in and give them the return on their investment and that you've earned it by the work you've done before. And if they didn't have the type of money to pay you, then they wouldn't be paying you. So the only pockets you need to be watching are the ones of those 32 NFL teams who are making hundreds of $millions a year and knowing they're going to keep making it, because people who love the NFL are not going to turn away. The stadiums are going to be full. TV ratings and streaming ratings are going to be insane. And people are going to pay whatever prices of tickets because the NFL is king.
This is true. I just had to get that off my chest, man. I thought it was interesting, man.
It's what it is. It happens in every sport. I mean, the NBA, where they're making about an average of $40 million a year, and then that's not talking the Steph Currys of the world. That's not talking, some of these guys. So it is what it is. Middle relievers in Major League Baseball are making $25 million a year. Yeah, that wouldn't happen if money wasn't rolling in.
This is true. That's the Get Off Your Chest segment for this episode. Let's get into some AFC South talk. And of course, we got to talk about the trades. Now, I know things were a little quiet. And when things are a little quiet on the trade front, I kind of get a little nervous, a little like, something's about to happen. And sure enough, boom, something happens. Laremy Tunsil traded to the Washington Commanders for a 2025 third-round pick, 2025 seventh-round pick, and a 2026 second-round pick, which is a lot of picks, from the Commanders, by the way. What did you think? What did you think of this trade when you heard it went down?
I was stunned, and that's something as a sports writer or sports reporter, you try not to be surprised or shocked too much because you never know what's going to happen. But just knowing that the Titans' offensive line was not very good last year, and then you trade somebody who's an incredibly talented player at left tackle, and the best left tackles in the NFL, after you change your OC and after you change your line coach, right? So that tells me the Texans were like, well, the issue wasn't the players. The issue was the scheme and how it was being coached, because we got rid of the coaches at those two particular spots. And then you go and move him. So one that tells you there's probably something a little more going on there, whether Tunsil wanted to be paid a little bit more. You know, I don't know. They wanted the picks back to get younger because they know they're going to have to pay CJ Stroud. They already paid Derek Stingley crazy money. You know, they're going to have to pay some of those other DBs, you know, Kamari Lassiter and Bullock and some of those guys. So that's them probably doing a little cap cleaning, but that's a vital position for CJ Stroud. So, and then the Commanders are like, great, because, you know, their GM, Adam Peters, was with the 49ers when they made a similar move at a similar stage of the player's career when they traded for Trent Williams at left tackle, who's paid mad dividends for them for like 5 or 6 years. So he's like, great, this is the same type of deal. The compensation is almost identical. If you go back and look at that trade, it was like a third and a fifth, you know, the higher pick was a future, just like this one. So I don't know what they have going on there because they haven't replaced it, you know, somebody of that caliber. So We'll see. That's a big move, especially seeing how some of the other teams in the division are loading up on the D front with some of the offseason moves they've made.
Right. And, you know, yeah, they did, speaking of trying to replace him, they did sign Cam Robinson who used to be with Jacksonville and with Minneapolis. But, you know, Cam Robinson versus Larry Tunsil, I still, it's not to me in terms of comparison. But, hey, I'm not mad at him for getting his money. But, hey, he got 1 year and I believe $14 million.
I mean, look, and you know, he's shown to be a very capable starter. So maybe that's all they want is a capable starter, again, who's affordable for what some of the moves that they have to make.
Yeah, maybe so. But yeah, that wasn't it for them.
That was an odd one. That was an odd one right there.
That wasn't it for them though. They definitely traded for another wide receiver. Now, of course, you know, Tank Dell probably, you know, going to be out for a good long while with that knee injury. You have Nico Collins, who's had some injury issues as well. So you go trade for a guy that was going to get released by the Jacksonville Jaguars until boom, last minute, boom, 7th round pick. They trade Christian Kirk to the Houston Texans. They're going to pay, from all accounts, pay his salary this year. The Houston Texans are, which is $16.5 million. What was your reaction to that trade? Because I honestly did not see that trade coming either.
I wasn't stunned because that's what you're going to have to pay him anyway. You know, Christian Kirk, when he's healthy, he's a productive player. He's been injured, but he was probably going to get that similar type of money somewhere. So go ahead and get him in your pocket. Look, you're down to Stephon Diggs and you're down Tank Dell. And what Christian Kirk does well, some of the deeper routes and some of the intermediate type of stuff, paired with Nico Collins, that's a nice one too. Right, I think they're going to add something in the draft as well. I think they need to get a little younger. They've got some young guys on that roster too that they want to get, you know, the ball a little bit more. So I think they feel they developed some younger players where the loss of Diggs and Tank Dell isn't going to be as significant as some think on paper. And getting a veteran who's just a world-class human being like Christian Kirk is probably something they want to get in their locker room as well.
Okay. All right. Yeah, maybe a John Mechie gets a few more touches potentially.
There's a couple other guys who aren't household names who they like.
The Hutchinson, I think, was the other guy from Iowa State.
Yep.
Now, of course, with Christian Kirk, it's essentially just like a 1-year deal, essentially. So do you just in seeing the last couple of years and, you know, how he's been injured, but, you know, versus what he could do when he's healthy. What are your thoughts just on him actually being there? Do you think he actually can make it through the season healthy, or do you think they're taking a little bit of a risk there?
You never know. I mean, again, players with injury history, especially as they age, that injury history tends to show up. I mean, look at Cooper Kupp with the Rams the last couple of years. He hasn't played more than 12 games in each of the last 3 years. I think a couple of years ago, he just played 9. So that's why LA got rid of him. And I actually thought Houston was kind of going to make a move for Kupp because what he could do in that scheme. But look, if one thing about injuries in the NFL, you never know when they're going to happen. I mean, Tank Dell, young in his career, did not know that he might have an injury in back-to-back years, especially this last one was a devastating injury where he might never play again. So if he stays healthy, fine. I mean, you just don't know. That's why I think they're going to draft someone else to add to depth at that position, because you just can't count on, Christian Kirk staying healthy for all 17. Mm-hmm. But if he does, I mean, look, you're going to get your money's worth, because he's a pretty darn good player. I thought he was an ordinary guy, and then when he went to Jacksonville, he showed up a little bit. And I think he's gotten better as he's gone along. I think he fits with what they want to do offensively. So, again, I think him paired with Nico Collins, what they could do together as a combo, I think that's something they feel pretty good about.
Okay. All right. Well, of course, Houston couldn't help themselves. They had to make another trade too. CJ Gardner-Johnson. They trade Kenyon Green to the Philadelphia
Another O-lineman.
Yeah. Another one gone. And they bring in CJ Gardner-Johnson. Now you've got a pretty crowded safety room, a pretty versatile safety room at that. And Jalen Petrie, Jimmy Ward, you got Caleb Bullock, and now you've got CJ Gardner-Johnson. Now you've got 4 pieces to go in 3 positions, in my opinion. And then you also got, like, thinking about it, Petrie, I could see him playing the slot guy.
Well, he's their nickel. He's their nickel.
Yeah.
Petrie's their nickel. So
I could see him more. I could see him more doing like a Kyle Hamilton type role. Am I mistaken in terms of that?
Well, I mean, that's where that position is going, where you want a combo safety. You look at what like the Saints did by getting Justin Reed, who's a combo safety, to go with Ty Matthew, who's a combo safety. So now defenses don't know what they're going to do. So that's where I think Petrie is a great piece. I think he's somebody who's, rising superstar. Who again, but I think he plays mainly. I think they like him with what they do schematically, especially with the pressure they get on the quarterback, to play mainly in the slot, because that's where so many of the good and varied receivers are. You might have a smaller guy, like a Christian Kirk body type, and then next week you might have a tight end or something body type in that slot, and he can handle both. So that's why I think his best fit is.
Gotcha. And I think with this trade too, I think this means Jimmy Ward's probably going to the bench when it comes to I don't see Caleb Bullock. I don't see Caleb Bullock going back to the bench with how he showed.
Bullock can play, man. Bullock can play. I think this might be one where Jimmy Ward, he's either going to the bench or he's going to be on the street. You never know, depending on how things go for the draft. I mean, he's a good player. He's familiar with DeMeco Ryans and that scheme that they like to do. But I think, getting someone like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, you're not putting him on the bench. He was a glue guy for the Eagles last year. I mean, he was big time for what they do. It's a veteran guy. When you've got a bunch of young, talented guys, you do need kind of that veteran dog in there. And we know Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is a dog. So he's gonna add a little hot sauce to a really good defense.
Yes, sir. Definitely. Well, we're gonna kind of switch over. We did the trades. Got to talk about some free agency moves, because, there definitely was some great free agency and interesting moves as well. Like, for example, Mr. Chris Ballard and with the Colts. Now, usually with the Colts, he signs his guys back, and, they basically bring the band back and all those different things. This year, he took a little bit different approach, and he spent a little bit more money. He brought in former 49ers cornerback Charvarius Ward. There we go. I got to slow down.
Call him Mooney. He goes by Mooney. Mooney's his nickname, so that'll make it easy for you. Mooney Ward.
There you go.
Good player.
All right. Yes, sir. He actually went to Middle Tennessee State. He actually played at Middle Tennessee State. So, like, literally about 20 minutes for me. And then he gets 3 years, $54 million, $35 million guaranteed. And then you got Cam Bynum, which I'm so looking forward to all the dances he's going to bring to the Indianapolis Colts. He gets 4 years and $60 million, $30 million guaranteed. I mean, do you think these moves were the kind of Ballard sensing that, hey, if I don't do anything this year, I could be out on the street?
Well, those weren't the moves that showed that he's got that attitude. The move was him going out and getting Daniel Jones to compete with Anthony Richardson. That was the move, where he's like, we got to fix this quarterback position or else I won't be making these calls next year. So to get to the defensive side of the ball, look, they changed coordinators. right? And they got to get ball hawks. One thing, Mooney Ward is a guy who can go man to man. He's sticky. He's around the ball, get his hands on the ball. And we know Cam Bynum's an interception machine. So that's like, okay, we've got all these guys up front who can put pressure on the quarterback. Now we got to have that result in either the quarterback having to pat the ball a little bit longer so they can get to him and finish the sack, or we got to get some turnovers, and I think that's why they went out and they got these two type of players, because Mooney Ward is an exceptional player, had a tough year last year with the 49ers.
Right.
He lost a child. It was really devastating. And I think, him coming to an environment like this will allow him to kind of get back, to what he was. Because remember, he was a hell of a player for the Chiefs before he went to the 49ers. And so, good for him. He's in the second big contract for him. And so, we'll just see how this defense takes place, because again, up front, they solidified that even further with some of the moves they made. They should be able to put some pressure on the quarterback.
Definitely. And now you mentioned, of course, Daniel Jones coming in there, or as they're calling him in Indianapolis, Indiana Jones, which they need to leave that to Harrison Ford. That's just my opinion. But anyway, they're bringing him in to compete with Anthony Richardson for the starting quarterback position. And, to me, honestly, I think if, this is a crossroads for both of these gentlemen at quarterback.
Yeah.
One wins. If one person wins, the other person either becomes a backup or could be gone eventually. So it's just, it's a lot of pressure on both guys going into this situation in this season.
Well, you got to keep them both around because they both have injury history.
Well, that's it.
That's the thing. Daniel Jones has rarely played a complete season. Anthony Richardson has not played a complete season. And when, remember when Anthony Richardson tapped out last year, some of the stuff you heard about him is like, this dude, he's got to learn to be what it's like to be a pro. He's got to have work ethic. Well, that's because they gave him the job out of the gate. The owner can't. Everyone said when he came out of Florida with 13 starts, this is a guy's a developmental player. And the owner says he's going to be our guy. So Shane Steichen's got to play him because the owner says he's our guy. So he hasn't had to compete. He's had it, he's had the silver tray handed to him, for room service. Now he's got to compete. He's got a player with similar physical stats, specs, whatever you want to call it. Big guy who can run. But both of their weaknesses are the same. They turn the ball over. They put it on the ground. They throw interceptions. Not great at reading defenses. So they're going to push one another. And, hopefully it's a healthy competition and not a bitter competition. But I do not blame the Colts whatsoever. Chris Ballard knows his job is on the line. Shane Steichen knows his job is on the line. You've got to get somewhere to push this young man, Anthony Richardson, because if you tap that potential now, you get him to realize there's gold behind that Fort Knox physique he has. You got something special. But if you got to push him this way to get it to happen, fine. And we may the best man win. This is one. Hopefully they take it down to the final preseason game and they make these guys truly compete. And the tipping scale should be what the other 10 guys in the huddle feel. Because if they believe in the quarterback, then you're ready to rock and roll. Because before Anthony Richardson got benched, you could tell those guys did not believe in him. When he came back, he played better. It's kind of like a Bryce Young thing. He wasn't as efficient as Bryce Young, but he played better. He heard some of the things. It was a reality check for him. So hopefully he understands that now and is getting ready. We'll see, because I think the Colts have the type of talent where they could be a playoff team.
Yeah, potentially a team that's trying to get back to the playoffs, though.
Lost some offensive linemen too. Losing those two offensive linemen.
Yeah, very much. I'm definitely going to talk about that a little bit later on. But team that picked up a couple linemen, that would be the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah,
picked up Dan Moore Jr. from the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're going to place him at left tackle, switch J.C. Latham over to right tackle. Also picked up Zeitler from the Lions. So they're going to put him at guard, one of the guard spots, and then they're going to put him and J.C. Latham on one side and Skoronski and Dan Moore Jr. on the opposite side. Now, to me, I think this is definitely an upgrade of what they had last year, because on the right side of the Titans offensive line, you had Nicholas Petit-Frere, and you had Radens right there. And it just never got consistency out of either one of those guys. So, I mean, definitely an upgrade for the O-line, you think?
We'll see. I mean, Kevin Zeitler's been around for a long time. Tough guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's at the definitely the tail end of his career. But I mean, offensive linemen, you know, they're a different breed, man. These guys can play until they're 36, 37 at a pretty high level. So we'll see. I mean, one thing about the Titans is what are they offensively, man? I mean, do they want their offensive linemen to run block? Do they want them to zone block? Do they want them to catch guys in pass pro? I don't think they've figured that out yet because they haven't figured out their quarterback situation. And we'll know with the number one pick exactly what they're going to do. You know, people I speak to don't think they're going to trade it. It's going to be the Cam Ward or Shedeur. But then that's where you got to have that offensive line. You got to have backs who can pass protect, and you've got to have a passing scheme which plays to that quarterback strengths.
Yeah, definitely. And then, you know, speaking of passing game and things like that, you know, the other issue that I think a lot of Titans fans had is the wide receiver room. You have Calvin Ridley, but then outside of Calvin Ridley, you had Nick Westbrook-Ikhine end up in Miami. You didn't really bring anybody in, but you know, we brought Van Jefferson, who's from the area. Well, in terms of playing high school football from the area, but you really didn't bring in any other pieces there. Did you think that they may have, you know, wanted to bring any pieces in, or did you just think that it just looked, you know, you would think they would try to bring some more weapons in for whoever they think the quarterback's going to be?
Yeah, I mean, they may have tried, and just those players went to other teams. There's going to be some other guys who are out there as well. I mean, you have to see where Stephon Diggs is physically, you know, if you want to bring a player like that in, if he's willing to come in. But again, there were some players out there. There's some wide receivers. The wide receiver market was kind of slow. But this is a deep wide receiver class in the draft. We'll see what they do. I mean, because you see the teams whose quarterbacks have functioned well early, they may not have had an abundance of, let's say, top shelf talent, but guys who worked well together. And I'll use the Commanders as a prime example last year. I mean, you know, you had scary Terry McLaurin, who finally got to showcase himself. They became a very tight end centric type of passing game. Zach Ertz had this great reemergence of what they wanted to do. And then, you know, De'Ami Brown and some of those guys who, you know, I think De'Ami Brown went elsewhere. I forget where he went, but
Jacksonville.
To Jacksonville. Okay, great. He's a good player, right? But one they found that was, you know, expendable. So if you can come up with the right type of player and the right type of offense, you don't have to have, you know, a bunch of A1 type of receivers, but you got to have quality guys who are going to get better and who are going to play well off of one another in that scheme.
Right. Now, I do want to touch on Jacksonville. Now, we just kind of mentioned it with De'Ami Brown. They signed nickelback Jordan Lewis, making him the highest paid nickelback in NFL history. Now, if you rewind back to 2024 in the offseason, they paid Darnell Savage to be nickelback at that point within that defense that they had. Now he's listed as being a safety, but you don't hear much talk about him there. So to me, it makes me wonder.
Savage came in as a safety though. He's been more of a safety. You know, look, Jordan Lewis, one of the best slot corner type players in the NFL. He can strap guys up. I mean, he's really good. You know, you put Trent McDuffie in that group with Taron Johnson, the Buffalo Bills in that group, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson in that group. But you know, again, they made the coaching change. They've got things that they want to do, and they've got people that want to fit a certain type of scheme. So that's why maybe they put Darnell Savage either box safety or in the back. Remember when he was early in his career, the Packers, he kind of played in that free spot. So, I mean, we'll see. But I mean, clearly Jordan Lewis is a player they feel, when you look at some of the receivers in that division and some of the things they want to do with that slot corner, you know, he'll come up and he is not afraid to put his hat on somebody in the run game as well. So,
right,
you know, scheme wise, he's probably a perfect type of fit. So,
Mm-hmm.
That's what they want. That gives you an indicator of what they want to do. And it also, when it comes to the draft, kind of gives you an indicator, okay, so they're not going to go with that type of player early in the draft as well.
Yeah. I just wondered because, it just was interesting that they brought him in and they were just last year were committed to Savage being a slot guy. And I'm like, didn't he play safety? That's where my mind was
Yeah.
going. I was like, this
And
didn't make sense.
And I think he was hurt, man. I don't think he played a lot
Not much. They didn't play
last year
much.
because they had a ton of injuries in that secondary in Jacksonville. I mean, they were not good at all in that secondary last year, and their scheme. Whew, hey man, one of the few games where Caleb Williams looked like a true number 1 draft pick and a Hall of Famer came against the Jags over in England. I was there. He tore him up, and Cole Kmet, the tight end, was the guy who was just tearing up that slot zone area. So that's why they went out and got a stud like Jordan Lewis.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's just interesting. It's always something interesting when it comes to Jacksonville and free agency or something. And then this year is going to be interesting too because potentially the cornerback battle with moving Jerry Jones back outside potentially, and then you've got him versus whoever at that position. So it'll be interesting to see if he takes over that spot as opposed to
and again we'll see what their scheme. We'll see how the scheme kind of factors into everything.
Yeah, definitely. Just had a few more questions. Want to talk about the draft just a little bit more since we haven't gotten to that arena yet. What are your thoughts on Cam Ward being the pick for the Titans? And do you truly think he has locked up the number 1 pick?
Yeah, I mean, whether the Titans trade it, which I don't think they should do, but you never know how the coaching staff feels about this quarterback if he's the guy they want to build around. But what are your other options now that we're this far in the free agency? I mean, Aaron Rodgers isn't coming to Tennessee. So I think that they've kind of tipped that. We've seen that when you try to be, a certain way and not get your quarterback, and let's say, okay, let's ride with Will Levis and someone else, like you're making no headway, right? And didn't they hire Brian Callahan because he's a good quarterback coach? Because he's one of these guys who can develop a young guy. Let him develop a young guy. I mean, this is the one thing I'm tired of in the NFL. We keep on hiring all these quarterback whisperers, and then are they really quarterback whisperers? Let's find out, because a lot of times they're not doing what they're supposed to do with these quarterbacks. So I think Cam Ward is probably the guy. I don't know. Again, I don't know if the Giants are going to try to trade up from 3 to get him. I don't know if Cleveland wants to, come up from 2 to get him. You just really don't know. But I would think it's Cam Ward or Shedeur is going to go 1 or 2. It just depends on if Tennessee stays at 1 to get him. And if they do, I think it's Cam Ward.
Gotcha. Yeah. It just, to me, I definitely agree that it definitely looks like it's Cam Ward. But one thing I also am looking at too is the pressure that's on Brian Callahan going into this season, because honestly, the way it feels around Tennessee, I'm not saying that, it is this way, but just the way it feels is like this year is either, it happens or bust for Brian Callahan, especially with the changeover in the front office this offseason.
And I hate that. I hate that, though. This is Brian Callahan's second year, right?
Right.
So the first year was not good. What you expect it to be when you make a coaching change. You don't make a coaching change if things are good. He comes in, you have no idea what that roster shaped last year. What are you doing? I mean, you go out and you sign, the D-Hops and all these guys like this, and you're paying money, but you have no real, doesn't seem like there was really any formula to what they want to do with the roster. So the season ends the way it ends, no surprise. And then all of a sudden he's on a hot seat, and you get it. Like you said, there's a new general manager in town, right? Is a GM hitching his wagon to this, or does he want to move on? It's a very uncomfortable dynamic. And that, it's top down thinking. And this is why some organizations are the way they are. The Steelers are the way they are. The Ravens are the way they are. And the Jets are the way they are. And Titans are the way they are. So they better figure out what they want to do as an organization. And if Brian Callahan's on a hot seat in just his second year, look, I don't know. Sean McVay ain't walking through that door. So I mean, I don't know what they're trying to do, but I hate the fact that it feels like all coaches are under pressure. But if he's feeling this has got to be a playoff or bust or a 9-win season or bust type thing, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's it just, you get that feeling, and it's just it's almost like you feel like it's repeating the same things over again. Like, you had the Vrabel and the John Robinson. Then John Robinson was gone. Then you brought in Rand Carthen. Then you had Vrabel and Carthen. Then Vrabel's gone. Now you got Vrabel and Callahan. And then now Carthon's gone. Now you've got Borgonzi and Brinker and Callahan. Now, it just, eventually the merry-go-round has to stop. Yeah. And they have to stick with what they have and kind of move forward and figure things out.
Yep.
It's interesting. But, of course, figuring things out is definitely what the Colts got to do up front after losing Ryan Kelly and Will Fries to the Minnesota Vikings, which I thought that was huge, losing both of those guys.
Both of them.
Yeah. So what do you think they is there potential they could get an offensive lineman early in this draft? Or
I think this tips. I think what happened in free agency, he tips the direction. That they're going in. I think that very much tips, because look, they got pretty good wide receiver. We know they got the quarterback situation the way they have it. Their defense is, I mean, look, that front is no joke. I mean, they've got some real guys up there. Zaire Franklin's a good linebacker. You talked about some of the moves they made in the secondary. Get Mooney Ward and Cam Bynum. So it seems like they're going to go heavy on the offense. You're going to stack up the offensive line, and roll from there.
Right. It just, they gotta do something. I mean, they gotta do something up there. They can't just roll out there with Painter and whatever guy they signed in center. And I know they drafted some guys last year, but nah, I don't think those are the guys they're going to roll out there and be the starters.
You never know, though. You never know. There's always, if you got a good old line coach, man, they're developing people we don't know about. There's a reason why they let those guys go. One of it could be financial, but you got a quarterback on a rookie deal, right? Yeah. So they may feel they've got something that's better, younger, and less expensive.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And one of those guys played at Wisconsin, and they're a factory for creating offensive linemen. And then the last, but certainly not least, I do want to talk about the Jaguars. They got Brian Thomas Jr., Gabe Davis, they got Parker Washington, they got De'Ami Brown, they got a lot of wide receivers. And they got a lot of different things they could potentially look at. But where do you think they go at pick number 5? I mean, I've heard if Travis Hunter drops here, we may get him. I've heard Mason Graham. I've heard all different kinds of names. It's kind of been all across the board in different positions. I mean, what are your thoughts on who they?
Well, I think the way their roster is, I think the way their roster is built, they could go to any position. I think Liam Cohen coming from that Sean McVay type of offense, same type of thing. If you're gonna go offensive lineman, it's a stretch zone scheme, but you got to have guys you can lock down in the pass pro. I wouldn't be surprised. They're not going to go edge. You got a lot of money tied up in their edge rushers right there. But if a good corner is there, again, their secondary last year was a mess. It was a mess. Good corners right there. They may opt that way. They've got some money tied up on their defensive interior. But again, I think this is one where they can go in a lot of different directions. They got to protect Trevor. They got to get him right. That is the main reason why Liam Cohen is there. And again, you don't need, with Liam Cohen coming from that kind of Rams tree, you don't necessarily need 3 stud receivers. We talked about the makeup of that. Right. You just mentioned adding De'Ami Brown to Brian Robinson Jr., Parker Washington, who's more of a return guy, but he can also get it done there. That's kind of fine. Now you got to be tough. You got to be tough. He's going to ask his receivers to come scoop some guys out and block. I mean, so that's part of it. But those guys might come open later in free agency, things like that. So I just think they can go in a lot of different directions. I think they've got a pretty decent, running back room. They might add to that later in the draft or undrafted. But I would think the offensive front or DB. Somewhere DB will be where they go pretty high in the draft if they don't slide back. I could see them being a trade back candidate as well.
Gotcha. And I also would add that it's going to be interesting what they do at running back as well, because ETN is coming to the end of that contract, and there's a lot of questions there, in my opinion.
Well, durability. His is a durability
issue.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I'm blanking on the guy who took a spot last year, but he was nasty.
I mean, Tank Bigsby.
Tank Bigsby's a real one.
Yeah,
he's a real one. But again, it depends on what Liam Cohen wants out of the position. And look what they got last year when he was in Tampa. When that rookie came in there and tore it up.
Definitely. I did forget one question. I did have the Texans have the 25th pick in this year's draft. If you were them, I mean, will we going offensive tackle here? We going offensive lineman? We going wide receiver? Where would you go if you were them?
Depends who's there, but I would really think, O-line or wide receiver, the better, whatever you have ranked, whatever player you have ranked on your board, higher, absolutely go there. I mean, they've got to rebuild that front. Again, you look at the fronts that some of these other teams in their division, AFC, have. You got to protect your main asset, and that is CJ Stroud. And he went through it last year because, man, he did not trust what was happening in front of him. And I don't blame him. They were terrible. They were penalized. They were terrible up front. You have got to fix that. And I'm sure that is assignment number one for DeMeco Ryans, as you saw when they made the quick change to change offensive coordinators and offensive line coaches, and making some of the changes they made on the front, like I said, trading Laramie Tunsil, which was a little bit of a head scratcher, but he's going to be wanting a new contract as well, and they've already paid him a lot of money twice.
Right. It'll be interesting to see what happens, but of course, we can't get out of the show without having a little bit of fun. We got 5 questions, 2 answers, and 1 choice. A little bit of music, a little bit of football, and a little bit of talk as well.
Sure.
You ready?
Yep.
All right. We got Gladys Knight or Shaka Khan. Which one are you going to live to see in concert?
Shaka Khan, who I've already seen, but I'm going to see Shaka again.
Yeah, I've definitely seen her live perform now. That was awesome. And she went off the stage and then she came back, performed again. Man, it was great. Let's see. You got Kyle McCord or Will Howard. If you have to choose a QB, which one are you taking between those two?
I don't know, man. I'll say Will Howard. Will Howard, I'm not going to go into too much. I'll just leave it right there.
All right. LA or Hawaii? Which one is the better place to be if you're there for an extended for like a week? I know you're in LA, but
I live in LA. I love LA. I love LA. I'm in Hawaii an awful lot too. Depends on what I want. If I want to go relax and chill out with my people, I'm over in Hawaii or on the Big Island or Oahu. But I love LA, man. I'm a Missouri boy, but I love LA, so I'm going to say LA. A lot of things to do here.
Yes, sir. Definitely has been there a few times to visit. It's been fun. Let's see. You're building a team from scratch. Are you building the trenches first or the skill positions?
Well, that's weird because I would say quarterback first, which is a skill position. But then other than that, I'm going through the trenches. You're seeing the teams that are there every year. They're interior players. You saw it with Philadelphia on the offensive and defensive line, and the Chiefs D line was good, even though they got attacked pretty well in that game. So I put that caveat on it, trenches, but I've got to go quarterback first if I build around somebody.
All right, last one: Gerald McCoy or Maurice Jones-Drew. You're sitting at the desk in NFL Network. Which one is riding with you for a whole hour?
Shoot, both of them are ride, but MJD. Oh man, what? Gerald is brilliant. I love the way Gerald has grown. Like, he's a superstar now. He is. And MJD has really, he's really like next level. He's so good. I don't think people appreciate how good and how smart he is. But if I'm sitting next to MJD, oh no, we're having a damn good time on that set.
Man, I'd love to have that dude on, man, because he is a wealth of knowledge.
He's great. He's great.
Knowledge. Yeah. Well, we have reached the end. That's 5 questions, 2 answers, and 1 choice. Steve, you're off the hot seat, and we've reached the end of the show. I want to thank you for coming on. If you want to tell anyone, if they don't know, they should know where they can find you on TV or anywhere else. The floor is yours.
Yeah, you find me on NFL Network, typically on the Insiders at this point of the season, and then my social handles at Wyche, WYCHE, the number 89. And that's it for right now. I'm pretty active on Instagram, more so than on that other one right now.
Yeah, no, I'll talk about it, but I'm gonna make my statements. But you can find me on the artist formerly known as Twitter. I will not call it X because the only X I recognize is DMX and Malcolm X. That's the only X I recognize. But you can find me on there at Mike Patton 82. That's MikePatton 82. You can also find me on Blue Sky. Same thing.
Same here.
You can also
too, yep.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And you can find me on Instagram and Threads at that's THA, not THE, _general_MP. Touring the AFC South, you can find on all listening platforms, whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, you name it, we are there. And of course, you can find us on YouTube as well. If you like to watch the show, like today's show, we went commercial free, definitely. But thank you all for tuning into this episode. Thank you, Steve, for coming on. We're out. Peace.